the human body does have a plan. We are going to talk here very briefly about our tube within tube, bilateral symmetry, dorsal hollow nerve cord, notochord and vertebrae, segmentation, and pharyngeal pouches. If this is sounding vaguely familiar because you took zoology, there's a reason for it. This is also something that will be covered in embryology if you took that class at a higher level. So, yes, this is a fish. The thing is, this plan, this notochord, segmented outer tube, dorsal hollow nerve tube, inner tube complex, pharyngeal pouches, it's a organizational plan, a developmental plan that is found in all organisms. How advanced that organizational plan is, how many of these features, is what zoology gets into, because it's how we classify, one of the ways we classify various phyla of, or groups of organisms. This is a fish. This phyla is going to have very similar embryology steps as our own. So there's a lot of overlap here. If you're curious about it, zoology is a great place to go to learn more details. We do not go into that much depth here, or an actual embryology class. But this notochord is going to become something specific. This dorsal hollow nerve tube is going to become the brain and spinal cord when we develop further. These pharyngeal pouches, these are going to become your lungs when we develop further. And here we have it. Here is our brain, our spinal cord. This is the dorsal hollow nerve tube. We have our notochord here. This is going to become involved with our digestive system and various other things. Here's our pharyngeal pouches that are going to become partially our lungs. We actually have one becoming a lung bud right here. We have our heart. We have the digestive tube here. We have the muscle segments or myotomes. This is about 5 weeks. This is what a human embryo looks like at 5 weeks. Take it in. If this is removed from its mother at 5 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, it cannot survive on its own. It has all the various bits and pieces, but it is unsurvivable. And this is true in the equivalent of 5 weeks, because various organisms have various gestation periods. This is true of all organisms. They are removed too early. They cannot survive on their own. Obviously, this is us as an adult. What does this become? Here is your dorsal nerve hollow tube, brain, spinal cord, digestive system. This is your inner tube. Your notochord has become the vertebrae here, and here are your segmented outer tubes, aka your muscles. Pharyngeal, right in here as well. The same basic plan. We're going to move straight into the cavities. So your body is divided into cavities. These are basically, think of them as further subdivisions of the regions. There are anterior and posterior, or ventral and dorsal body cavities. 5 big ones altogether, and then many of them are further subdivided. The dorsal body cavities are divided into the cranial and vertebral cavities. Backing up here, cranial is going to contain your skull. Vertebral cavity is going to contain your spinal cord. So nice and easy. The ventral body cavities, there are 3 of them, are divided into your thoracic, abdominal and pelvic cavities. The abdominal and pelvic cavities tend to be lumped together and called the abdominal pelvic cavity, but they are two separate ones. So your thoracic cavity is going to be found underneath your rib cage and is divided into three parts. You will have two lateral parts that are referred to as the pleural cavities. They are surrounding your lungs, the space around your lungs. Underneath your sternum, you're going to find the mediastinal cavity, which is going to contain the heart. The abdominal pelvic cavity. The abdominal cavity is going to run from your diaphragm to about the top of your pelvis, and that is going to contain the vast majority of your internal organs, so liver, stomach, kidneys, small intestine, large intestine, gallbladder, spleen. Pelvic cavity is going to be found within your pelvis, and that's going to contain your internal reproductive organs, your bladder, the rectum, anything you find in that area. This is a side view of that. This is a sagittal view. And this is a frontal view. Then we have things referred to as serous cavities. Serous cavities are a slit-like space that is lined with a serous membrane. The serous membrane is going to secrete serous fluid. Serous fluid, think of it as lubricant. It is like oil. It allows these membranes to move over each other to help prevent friction rub. So we have three primary serous cavities and serous membranes. We have pleural, pericardium, and peritoneum. The pleura is going to be found around the lungs. The pericardium is going to be found around the heart. For those of you who have hopefully taken MedTerm like you were supposed to, cardi, heart, peri, around the heart. And then the peritoneum is going to be found around the viscera or internal organs. Now, the viscera, the serous membrane, the serous membrane is divided, or folded, I should say, into a double layer. It's going to have an inner layer and an outer layer. That inner layer is going to be referred to as the visceral layer. The outer layer is going to be referred to as the parietal layer. And this will be true regardless of whether or not we're talking about the peritoneum or the pericardium or the pleural. So it will be parietal, pleura, serosa, the outer lung membrane. Visceral, pleura, serosa, the inner lung membrane. And you can do that with all three. And I mentioned the serous fluid already. It helps prevent friction. Here we have an image of those membranes. Here's the heart one. And then some of the abdominal one. The abdominal one is actually super complicated because it has to wrap and layer over all of the internal organs. So it's a lot more complicated. Think of it much like sticking your hand in a balloon. You have an inner and an outer layer. We're going to move into the next section here.